I know the title of this video is pretty clickbaity, but there's been a lot of stuff happening recently that I really want to talk about and hopefully tie into some of the literature works that I've been discussing with Brave New World and even a little bit now with 1984. For starters, I don't think I was necessarily wrong with my connection with Brave New World and things that are happening today in society, but upon reflecting over these past few days on what events have been going on, especially in the US, I think I might have discredited 1984 and how relative it is to today's time. So for today's video, I want to bring that credit back to 1984 and hopefully tie it in with some things that are going on. First off, there has been a lot of protesting going on lately. I know on the 14th, I'm recording this on the 16th. On the 14th, there was the No King's Day protesting, which was pretty awesome. A lot of people gathered from all over the country to support that. A few days prior to that, there was protests in LA about ICE and immigration raids that were going on and how unethical those were. So there's been a lot of pushback against primarily the immigration stuff that's been talked about lately. And I want to kind of tie in not necessarily ICE itself, but the policies surrounding ICE as well as some of its practices to what you can see in 1984. For those of you who don't know or who haven't read the book, 1984 is a dystopian fiction science novel by George Orwell, and it goes over what 1984 could have been like from the perspective of Orwell, who was writing this in like the 50s or so. Basically, he centered the entire story around, I guess, hidden espionage within a country where everyone's spying on each other, all the neighbors are spying on each other to hopefully catch people in seditious acts. There were also government agencies, such as the Ministry of Truth, the Ministry of Love, and the Ministry of Peace, and they all acted in different functions to, I guess, quote-unquote, maintain order in the Society of Oceania, which is basically London and that part of Europe. Contrarily to the name of the departments, the Ministry of Peace was the military, so they acted in war. The Ministry of Love was the brainwashing organization where they conducted counter-espionage and they brought dissenters into facilities to brainwash them into loving the government. And the Ministry of Truth was in charge of creating propaganda that would obviously mislead citizens into thinking that the country was winning the war and was doing all these great things when in fact everyone happened to be poor because the country had very little resources. There's obviously a lot of correlations between this and the North Korean government and society, and actually very, very similar conditions and how working conditions were. But in terms of the US, I do see a lot of parallels between these ministries and government departments like ICE. Specifically, you see that immigration control is doing raids in public areas and into homes and houses of people who are suspected, not necessarily criminals, but just suspected illegal immigrants. And they're conducting these raids with no masks. They're doing them with no badges. You can't even identify whether they're ICE. And it sparked a lot of mistrust among immigrants and people in the community of LA, where they're on their toes constantly, not knowing whether this person walking into a store happens to be an ICE agent, or whether they're someone across the street is gonna raid their house because they're looking at them weird. And what I think is the most concerning is that these raids aren't targeted towards specific criminals or gang members or anything of the sort. They're just targeted towards, for lack of a better word, brown people. It's an ethnic pushback, an ethnic cleansing of places like LA. Now, I do want to be clear. I obviously think that immigration reform is needed and necessary for the country. I also agree that there has to be limitations on immigration, that there has to be legal checks, and that illegal immigrants are breaking the law. I'm not saying that they need to be let off scot-free. But the practices going on to accomplish this sort of thing are highly unethical and have created very difficult problems for families, children being separated from their parents, and the whole structure of ICE is just really, really terrible, for lack of a better word. And this does remind me of the Ministry of Love from 1984, where there were espionage groups hunting out people who were suspected criminals, even if they had done nothing wrong, even if they had just looked the wrong way or saw the wrong thing. They would be captured, taken in by unknown people, unknown assailants, and brought to the Ministry of Love and brainwashed. And you can kind of, without me needing to explain much more, you can kind of see the parallels between what's going on there and what's going on right now. Another parallel I've been seeing lately is how the rhetoric around these protests and these events are going on are blown extremely out of proportion on social media. You see words thrown around by President Trump and people close to him like insurrection or violent uprising, and these could be farther from the truth. If you really look into the protests that are going on, it's only happening within at least in the ones in LA. These are the ones in LA specifically. It's happening in like a 4-block radius. It's not very big. At the front lines, there are people honking and shouting out things and trying to make their voices heard, but it's not violent. There's been clips thrown around on social media that are fake. Now, I'm not condoning the protesters throwing rocks at Waymos or whatever, destroying Waymos. That's not cool. Don't do that. I don't think that helps at all. I think it worsens your cause. But at the same time, there are fake things thrown around. There was a post from Ted Cruz on Twitter where he posted about protesters destroying stuff, rioting, and it was from 2020. It wasn't even from now, but he claimed that it was from a few days ago. Onto the whole insurrection thing, this is nowhere near anything related to insurrection. If you wanted to call insurrection, you could have talked about January 6th, but that's a whole different story. The reason that this is being called an insurrection by some extreme right-wing politicians is to put forth the Insurrection Act of 1807, which gives the president emergency powers during times of insurrection or during times of seditious acts. And these emergency powers can allow the president to levy the military or act without congressional approval, which is very, very dangerous and is only necessary in times of pretty much disaster, which is not what's happening right now. Another reason there's been so much media coverage on this is, especially on the right-wing side, to focus away from issues that are negatively impacting the right-wing side in favor of something that a lot of Republicans agree on, immigration. So in all, specifically right-wing coverage of the protests that have been going on and the fact that it's being blown way out of proportion on social media has primarily been a political ploy in order to focus away from issues that are negatively impacting Donald Trump and the people in the cabinet around him, as well as the Republican Party as a whole, and focus more on immigration, which is something that they can all agree on, and something that liberals have really been struggling to work around. I can go into a whole different topic about how liberals are or specifically the Democratic Party, rather, is terrible at making policy changes. They're really good at shutting things down. They're very bad at building things up or creating new policy. But that's a whole different topic. I would like to talk about that in the abundance video though, which I will be making soon. So I will be mentioning a lot of that. I know this is by far the most political video I've made, and I understand that maybe some of my viewers don't agree with my political takes, and you don't have to. I'm not forcing you to believe anything, but I do encourage everyone to look at the facts that are presenting before them and understand that everything needs to be taken with a grain of salt. Whether it's a video you see on social media or a post you see by any prominent figure in the space, take it with a grain of salt and do your own research especially. I really just wanted to make this video to make a connection between the literature that I've been reading about as well as some of the events that have been going on, because I thought it would be pretty interesting. If you guys have any thoughts about what's been going on, feel free to share them in the comments or send them to the email that I have pinned in the description below. I don't plan on making many political videos like this. I'm not big into sharing my political view out on social media, but I thought that with what's been going on lately and how troubling it has been for a lot of people, I felt it would be important to say something. And what better way to say something than to put it in the format that I have been using, which is connecting literature or connecting other things that are in my life with current events. But regardless, I don't plan on making many more of these videos in the future. It doesn't really interest me. I like the book talks. I like the gym stuff, so I'm probably going to stick with that. But I hope you enjoyed this little video, and I will see you all in the abundance video, which funnily enough, that's probably going to get political, but it is a literature book, so I'm going to not count it as that. Anyways, take care and have a great day.